Hi everyone, welcome back to the second part of lecture. Appreciate you hanging in there with me. I know the semester's almost done and we're getting to some heavy topics. So I know it's hard sometimes, but I do appreciate it. Okay, with that, we're going to jump into talking about different types of racism. We just talked about how race is defined and how it is a social construct, and we see that definition of race changing over time. And the reason we change that definition over time is because we reassign value to certain groups of people. And that value then gets associated with who is the dominant group and who is the minority group. And then from there, we assign that the dominant groups has privilege and the minority groups are oppressed. With that in mind, we're going to move into racism and take a look at how racism can be utilized or weaponized, or how it takes place in different scenarios. The first one I want to talk to you about is colorblind racism. And this is really the idea that there's not a problem anymore with race. Everybody is equal. Race doesn't matter. There's nothing that's impacting anybody's daily life because of their race. It's going to ignore the systematic racism and oppression that dominates society, the dominant society benefits from. Thinking about historically, we learned about redlining, and the idea behind colorblind racism would be, well, that doesn't happen anymore. We're not having those policies anymore. Our housing policies are fair. So it's really not an issue anymore. We can move on from there. But now we know that historically, because of those policies, it's still impactful to this day. But colorblind racism would argue, doesn't matter anymore. We don't have those policies anymore. Okay? Moving on to environmental racism, this is the idea that we identify regions and communities of minorities in order to dispose of things that are not good for your health. Unhealthy materials, toxic materials, we might put, garbage areas nearby, disposal areas. We might have sewage nearby. We might have power plants nearby. We also might not take care of the water that much as well. A great example is Flint, Michigan. The idea that the majority of those communities that were impacted by lead in their water were minority communities. And this happens because there's a lack of representation on the boards, and decision-making really is left to dominant communities. And so funding and oversight typically happens more in the dominant communities, and the minority communities are left behind. Okay, moving on to other types of racism. Let's talk about ideological racism. And this is when we assign physical characteristics that are linked with abilities. It promotes kind of a hierarchy of grouping, this idea that certain races have different abilities, right? And the best example of this that I could come up with is the idea of labeling Hispanics as bad hombres, right? We're using this language kind of categorizing this whole group of people as being bad or, having some kind of negative attributes about them that we need to be worried about. In reality, that's not the case, obviously, but because we use that language, it becomes part of our thinking. Okay, and that's intentional, obviously. We're trying to be very intentional about how we think about groups, because then we can assign value to them. Getting back to that social construct, it always goes back to how we define and then assigning value. Okay, the next one is internalized racism, and that's when members of a group that have been continually suppressed begin to believe their treatment is warranted. So over time, they feel like, well, I've been suppressed for so long. Clearly, it's because we are not meant to have whatever it might be. We are not meant to be equal. There's something about our group of people that doesn't deserve that. Okay? Moving on to more racism. There's intergroup and interpersonal racism, and that occurs between groups that have been suppressed. The idea that maybe you can't get a job because another race has taken the job from you. In reality, it might be a bigger picture. Something else might be happening that is causing there to be less jobs, but instead of understanding that or recognizing that, it's easier to blame another group that is also suppressed, who is also a minority. There's also intergroup racism that occurs within the group. It creates a hierarchy within the group. So thinking about, for example, one example might be immigrants and current new naturalized citizens who had immigrated to the country. So they might feel like they're better than new immigrants immigrating to the country. And so you create this inner hierarchy, right, of I'm better because now I am naturalized, you're not naturalized yet, so you are not as good as me. There's this inner ranking that happens within a certain race. It can also be ranking based on skin color. We see this in our own history in the United States, right, how we classified white over and over again, depending on how it would meet our needs. It also happened in South Africa with apartheid and how they classified what was white and black as well. So it's not unique to the United States, unfortunately. Other countries see it as well. All right, moving on. We also have modern racism, where beliefs of white people that anti-other groups do not exist anymore, and therefore changes are unnecessary. So this idea that, it doesn't happen anymore. We all kind of like each other. And this a good example of this is currently in our in current news, we're trying to review the Voting Rights Act and see if it's even necessary anymore. The argument would be that it's not an issue anymore. Everybody has the right to vote. We can remove it. When the Voting Rights Act was put into place to make sure that everybody had access to voting. We also see structural racism, and that's when we put structures in place, both current and historical, which perpetuate the privilege for being white and disadvantage for not being white. And again, we go back to that example of learning about redlining, right? Those policies were put in place to perpetuate privilege. We see some of this in school curriculums as well, and access to schooling. There's also sometimes this exists in policing. All right, and the last one is subtle or covert racism. It's hidden, it's not obvious, it's small but impactful over time. And this is a language in which we describe and discuss minorities. A great example of this, if you think way back to the beginning of the semester, is the school language we use to describe certain groups of people, right? When we say achievement gap, so we're putting our language on them. It's their fault they're not doing as well. Or disadvantaged students. Again, your fault you're not doing as well. We're giving you what you need. It belongs to you. You are the problem. It looks on surface level, this language is intended to help these populations, right? It looks like, well, we're just trying to give them what they need. But the way that our brain kind of stores that information and interprets it is this idea that, well, it does belong to them. They are disadvantaged. Okay? All right, with that, that's all we're going to talk about for racism. Thank you for hanging there with me. I'm going to see you back here for the next part of our lecture when we talk about media.